Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, whatever time it is you're watching this. My name's Elsa Lund, and I'm doing my presentation on for Educational Giant on Jean-Jacques Rousseau. And so I'm just going to go over the PowerPoint briefly so this doesn't take too long. I found a quote from him, excuse me, that I think sums up the importance of education. So, we are born weak, we need strength. Helpless, we need aid. Foolish, we need reason. All that we lack at birth, all that we need when we come to man's estate is the gift of education. So he just really felt like education was what we need and the solution to every problem. So we're just going to talk about a little bit about his early life, and you can follow along in the PowerPoint. He was born in Geneva in June of 1712. He died July 2nd, 1778. His father was a clockmaker, and his mom died shortly after he was born, just a few days after, and he actually didn't really grow up with a mother figure. He had some odd relationships later with women in his life, where at one point there was a woman who was a mother figure, a friend, and also his lover, so it was like a really, really weird relationship. Eventually he moved to Paris in 1742, where he worked with Denis Diderot on the Encyclopédie, which was a huge compiled book of all these great works and all these great minds that added to it, and Rousseau was one of them. And when Diderot died, there were about 15,000 of them in circulation, and so there weren't that many, but it held such vast knowledge that, I mean, I know 2 of our founding fathers read the whole thing because of just the quality of work in it. So he had a lot of ambitions in life. He didn't just settle down to be an educational giant. He wanted to compose, but his composition was rejected. So then he moved and worked at the French embassy in Venice, Italy, and there he actually became interested in Italian opera. So he wrote a few operas, he wrote some books, which is actually more of what he's famous for. He wrote a book, Emily. It's actually, the character is a man and a boy, a French boy, and so the whole story about that is that it shows how children should be taught, and it's like a key example of how the interaction between adults and students or children should be. And he felt that adults were very different from children, and the key to that was we can't, as adults and teachers, we can't force a child to be a certain way. We have to let them go naturally. And he was actually a naturalist, and so he really did feel that we progressed in a natural trend. And so as teachers, we need to mold the world around them, the environment that we can control, so that they grow naturally and they progress that way at their own rate, so they don't feel forced and like we change them. So he believed that the purpose of education was to create good citizens, which I don't think many educators think, I'm going to choose to make bad citizens in my classroom. Again, he believed that children were very different from adults. He had 5 stages that covered just basic, like by age, and it said like what should be changed about them, what's changed, what's like more developed than other ages. And so like the first was infancy, so it's birth to 2 years, the age of nature, which is when they're just really exploring everything, and we understand this too now. From age 2 to 12, kids are very, very interested in the world around them. I mean, even like infants and toddlers and really hyper, 12-year-olds are just interested in everything that's going on and not really able to settle down and learn from someone standing over and teaching them and saying, like, you need to learn this. They need to understand why. And so there's this whole struggle of like what you need to know versus what you might want in life, and so it's a lot of his stages focus on like knowing the difference between need and want and avoiding the pressure. And so stage 3 is pre-adolescence, it's 12 to 15. Stage 4 is pretty key. It's puberty, and this is when religion is actually introduced, because before this time he feels like the mind isn't developed enough to make that decision and to handle the complex emotions of the world and issues, and religion was one of those complex issues. And so religion just really isn't supposed to be introduced to students or to kids until about 15 is what he feels. And I mean, we've obviously changed how we feel about that, and to each his own kind of thing when it comes to that. Stage 5 is adulthood, and this is the final stage. Age 20, 25, and this is when he does feel like you should settle down, you should be prepared to have your partner, basically. And he really did, he was, for his age, you know, his time in our history, he was, you know, not considered sexist because this was very normal, but he believed that women were to be educated as complements to the men. So women were weak and passive, and men were strong and active. Men should have the power and will, and women should not resist. And so he felt like women should still be educated, but should be, their focus should be on, you know, being polite, being courteous, and just anything that complements the male qualities. So that's just a little bit of information about Rousseau. Hope you enjoyed it. So have a good night.